3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. This episode featured by UnX. The UnX network will be a live stream coming on soon. I'll have a description for that in the post. And with me tonight on this episode, I have Dan Spell and Mike Panicello, both from MUFON. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, sir. Good.
Good, Adam. How are you? Thank you for having me on tonight.
No, not a problem.
Thank you as well. I appreciate the opportunity.
So there's a lot going on, right? MUFON's numbers are growing, as I've been reading. The interest, obviously, because of the report made back in June, which as little as there was, has generated some interest. In fact, that safe report caused more interest than they suspected, I imagine. Are you guys finding that across in your realm?
I think so. I think the report, even though it was to many underwhelming, I think it did have a positive impact, and it did generate interest. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It did get the word out there about ufology, and it bring attention to the field, which is always a great thing.
Yeah, soon here I'm going to be speaking to Steve Murr again, and he's a paranormal expert. And on the episode I had with him, he was discussing how we shouldn't compartmentalize so many of these phenomena. There's a lot of parallels, and he's interested in building a network where he can, cross communicates with MUFON members, and I suggested the two of you strongly. And I think it's a good idea to do that, to kind of break down some barriers, have some open talks, because again, some important details could be missed when you kind of close off to different subject matter.
Absolutely. I don't know about Dan, but a lot of my MUFON members that attend my meetings, they cross over a lot. They will be into the paranormal or cryptozoology, which has a little bit of a paranormal flair to it, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. So it seems like a natural transition to just do something where everyone is involved and they can cross collaborate.
Yeah, I agree. And Dan, you're formerly you worked in the government,
right?
And I don't know, is it the same in the government when they research a specific subject? Do they compartmentalize things often?
Yeah, the nature of the job requires that, and we base it on need to know.
Right.
I mean, sure, you have to collaborate as much as possible, but there are things that we did and still do that you can't just share across the board for national security reasons.
Right, and I imagine that also prevents misinformation.
It does, and it also causes problems. I mean, lack of communication takes place, and we call that stovepiping.
Huh.
A lot of that led to 9/11. I mean, agencies were not communicating as well as they should have.
Yeah, I did read that, actually. That was super unfortunate.
Yeah.
Moving forward, obviously, this is an introduction for you and for Mike, and I definitely want the two of you, to communicate often, because you're very like-minded and very analytical, which is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I come across, I can't tell you the amount of inbox mail I get with theories and ideas. So over time, I'm going to spill some of that upon you and get your idea from it, or at least your opinion. One being, and this is the strongest one I'm getting so far. A lot of people believe that what we have in our atmosphere is something that we have that's really advanced. That would be a black project. And personally, I tend to disagree with that, because they're doing this in and around military operations and drills and nuclear sites. I can't come to terms with that being something of ours, and we'd play around with our very expensive projects. I mean, I don't. Is that so?
Well, as a citizen of this country, if it is made on this planet, I hope to God it is ours, and not from our adversaries.
Right.
I can't prove what it is one way or the other, but if it's anyone's, I hope it's ours.
Indeed, because I have this belief system. If it were to be like, say, Russia or China, I don't think they'd hide it from us very long, right? Because that's a real, well, what can you do about this type moment? That's a game changer.
Sure.
So get Mike.
I mean, a good example was just the recent test from the Chinese Communist Party of the hypersonic missile. According to our intelligence agencies, that was taken by a complete surprise on our end. So there is some weird testing and unique and very advanced testing going on by our adversaries.
Yeah, that concerns me, the hypersonic missile. I don't know what we have in place to deal with that, because just the word hypersonic means nothing traditional is going to catch up to it or stop it, right? Then you'd have to move into concentrated energy to deal with that. You're talking lasers or maybe sound waves.
Particle beam weapons, yeah.
Yeah, because I just, that terrifies me, because that's, you think of what that is, that's a projectile that can make it from them to us in like 30 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah,
Like
probably.
That.
Yeah, that frightens me. I don't know. So for the two of you, we'll start with Mike in this. Moving forward, do you think we're going to see more activity from the government regarding the subject?
I think the government has kind of put that at rest with the report in June, my opinion. I think that was their temporary nail in the coffin. I'm sure it's going to resurface again. I mean, they thought that it was going to be done, the whole UFO discussion with the Condon report with Project Blue Book in the 60s, and now it's this report. So I don't think it's the end of the government involvement or having the government be forced to answer questions on the ufology front. But I do think that any advancement that comes out now will probably be more on the private sector. You know, we have that Avi Loeb, I believe is his name, out in Harvard, who is working on creating an organization. He's getting the word out. Stephen Greer, he's a interesting polarizing figure, I guess, in the field. Some like him, some don't, but he does a lot in the way of disclosure. And there's others that are out there that I could name. But I think that's where it's going to go. And I think what it's going to be is if these private citizens can focus on the credible sightings and the videos. That's why the government was forced to answer these questions on ufology, because they couldn't explain the Tic Tac video. They tried to dance around it, if you remember, before the report came out, of saying it was this, it was that, it wasn't ours, we didn't release it, it was ours. They do exist, the video. So the evidence is the evidence. And as long as the private citizens who pick up the mantle going forward get those credible sources, the pilots, the people who has something that in the way of evidence, it's not going to go away. So that's what I think.
I agree. If you look at, especially the Tic Tac, the more and more I read about that, the more, like, again, the cigar-shaped cylindrical objects that were spotted through time really lines up with the description of that object. And you're talking about prior to electricity that was being discussed. I didn't realize, in reading some of the stuff I read, I didn't realize how far back the sightings were. They're pretty common, even for Christopher Columbus. I was shocked to hear that they were seeing abnormal lights in the sky moving. I don't think that they, obviously in that time they weren't saying UFO. They were thinking something more angelic, but it's been spoken of. Dan, in working in the government, Dan, with this disclosure, hypothetically speaking, you're back there, you're working in the Department of Defense, you hear this report, and so how do you take it at that time in that position?
The report that came out in June?
Right. Well, just like, let's not the report in June. Let's say UFOs are being discussed and there's let's go back to the videos from the pilots. And now we're going to put yourself back in a position of Department of Defense where you worked. You hear this. How do you guys interpret it at that time?
The position that I had was with NSA, so I had no involvement with aerospace type things at all.
Right.
When I heard that, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. But that's as far as it went for me, because I was not directly involved in that field. Right. So is it hard? Is it like, so I guess what I'm asking, in the agencies, when they get these reports, how do they treat them? Well, before it was released to the public, it would have been compartmentalized, of course, classified very high, and relatively few people would see it. Only those with that need to know.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why Lou Elizondo resigned, right? Which, respectfully, because he still has an oath he's under, he doesn't speak totally. I mean, I could see stress in his face when he talks about it.
Well, yeah, that he, like I did, Lou signed an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. That doesn't end when you retire or leave the government. That goes with you until the day you die. That's lifetime.
So that explains the anguish on his face when he speaks about it, because you can tell he wants to say more, but he's reserved.
It's very tough.
That's bizarre, because how would he be able to release I don't know. That's a good question for the future, right? I'm going to find out about that. There's got to be like a kind of roundabout way where maybe he hints, and then Tom DeLonge comes out with his own quote unquote theory. So right. I don't know. Between the two of you guys, we'll pan back over to Mike. Any recent cases you're coming across that have your full attention?
Recent cases, we're getting a lot of orbs in Connecticut. We have 15 active cases right now, which is a lot for us. Our numbers have skyrocketed. I attribute it to the report that's coming out, and I think we've done a pretty good job of publicizing our chapter to get the word out that we exist. But over the last several months, our numbers have been going up and up in the way of case reports. And right now we have 15, and a large majority of them are orb sightings. And they're the traditional orbs that are little balls of orange light. Sometimes they're white light. They're moving around in like weird zigzag patterns. So that's kind of what's going on right now in Connecticut in the way of sightings. And so they have my attention, because I know that in the field of ufology, it's always orbs and black triangles are like the kind of the dominant ones that you always hear about as sightings. And right now we're kind of going through an orb phase, which is unique for us. We haven't had this many orb cases in a long time since I've been state director. So, and that's since 2013. So it's got my attention. I'm very curious to see what this is.
Yeah,
the reason for it.
I was talking a little bit with Doug Wilson, regarding, methods of recording these things. And I won't go into too much detail. He's on the podcast. I'm going to have him. He's going to discuss, field equipment and his suggestions anyway. But for the orbs, that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. That's tough, because there are reports, and I'm sure you want to get out there with proper equipment and catch one. It's a matter of what equipment, right? Because that's definitely not a cell phone, because it's going to over-pixelate. It's going to overcompensate for what it is you're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a lot of the videos we get are cell phones, because everyone has cell phones now. Everyone has a smartphone, and they forget that it's a great camera, but it's designed for selfies. It's not designed for distance photography, and It's not a high-grade professional camera. As much as the smartphone companies try and market them as high-end cameras, they're not.
I mean, they're only high-end up to 5 feet best.
Exactly.
And that's meant for good photos to make it on social media.
Exactly, yes.
What about you, Dan? What cases are catching your attention?
A couple, actually. First, I wanted to give you a little statistical information. This year, between 1 January and today, we've had 73 sightings reported to us. Of those 73, 13 we've classified as true unknowns, that is, unknown UAP objects. And among those, we've had, think spheres, we've had disc-shaped objects, tic-tacs, ovals, triangles, and cigar-shaped objects. Yeah, I'm working on a case now. The sighting took place in September in Pasadena, Maryland. A young lady was sitting on a bench, relaxing about 9 o'clock at night, looking out over the Magothy River, which is an estuary connected to the Chesapeake Bay. And she saw 2 white lights flying in the sky, not directly above her, but out a little bit. And they were performing some interesting maneuvers. They were rising up and down, and they were swirling in a pattern, not spinning or like a top, but doing, circular motions. So that really caught her eye. But then a short time later, she saw two V-shaped objects approach those two white lights, and those two V-shaped objects, or triangles, if you will, had 5 lights each on them. One at the very point of the triangle, and then 2 on either side. And those 2 white lights that I mentioned earlier, they synced up with the V-shaped objects. And in an instant, she reported they were gone. And now, two other interesting top aspects of that case are her phone went haywire. It just shut down when she took it out to try to get pictures of it, and it just shut down completely. And the second thing was, she reports that after that sighting, she developed these marks on her chest, these white bumps that she did not have before. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily related, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I gotta say, I read that a lot too in case study. People having physical negative effects from these encounters. Then this is where my imagination starts to play. I have to wonder what powers that object, and if it is, even if it's magnetic or anti-gravity, we don't know. We're still learning about we still don't know full negative effects of an MRI, other than it does change your DNA slightly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just what we see at the surface. So when you amplify that energy times whatever, who knows what that's doing? That's another tough one to come across. When you're saying about the triangles and the different shapes, I stress this again. We have cars on this planet. None of them are the same. They all have their own objective, right? Their own purpose for existence. No two are going to be the same. And as time progresses, they're going to, like, again, the 1990s model versus today's model. It's going to look different, but it's going to serve its purpose for that model. When I keep hearing about these triangles, I'm led to believe that they're more surveillance than anything else. And the tic-tac and or cylindrical shape sounds like commute, like large body of group commute. So it's tough. And then, you hear about the David Fravor case where it's in and around fighter jets and the way it's performing. It should be, the government should be very concerned about that. Not just slightly, not dismissive, very concerned about that. There's nothing you could legitimately do. So I guess what I have to ask is, where do we go from here now, knowing the capability?
Well, I think we know the capability to an extent, but I don't know if we are at the point where we can figure out our next step after that. I still think we're in the point of truly digesting this information and classifying it and trying to just wrap our head around it.
Right.
Before we can put up a game plan of how to go from there. I know that like CE5, some people think you should try and make contact with them, and that's a great object to do, and that's a great objective, and more power to you if that's what you want to pursue as a way of researching this field. Great, go for it. Me personally, I know that I think we still have a long way to go before we can answer your question of where do we go from here.
Right. For your chapters too, your field investigators, and here I'll read what someone asked me. That's going to sound silly, but I'm going to take it as this is her best analysis for what should be done. Why isn't there a neighborhood to watch for the MUFON chapters? And I didn't have an answer because I didn't know. I didn't ever ask that before. Where they have specific equipment like film used cameras, and then as far as video cameras, higher end ones. I don't know the answer to that, but it sounds like a good idea. I mean, made me want to do it. In your investigations or your field people, are they using better equipment than what the average person would use?
Well, I would say here in Maryland, we have some high-end gear, but not to the extent that person is suggesting.
Right.
You got to remember, we don't have a budget. I mean, MUFON doesn't give us money for equipment at all.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit.
We have to buy it.
Gives me some ideas about getting equipment to the chapters, but we'll discuss that later. Because, yeah.
Back to your question about where do we go? I think it's really, who is we? I mean, there's no one who can really speak for this planet on where we as a species should go.
That's a very
who do we go to make that call? Is it the United Nations? Is it the U.S.? Is it some consortium of government other than the UN?
It's true.
So, the U.S. can say, well, we're going to do this, but Russia may say something completely different. So it's a real challenge.
It is, especially for the U.S. I mean, part of the issue is that for me anyway, they seem very relaxed, and I don't sense any urgency for them to discover what it is, which I now understand why some people go down that road, that conspiracy road of, it's the government. But then for me, it's, well, what are they supposed to do? Right? Like if they're performing what they're performing, what are they supposed to do? And I'm sure someone somewhere is working on something to better track them or locate them. For the general public, the best I could tell them is if you're an enthusiast and you want to go out there and find these things, use proper equipment, right? The proper camera or a better video recorder. Like the camera I got for the purpose of the documentary, it has IR features on it. So when I go out there and look, I'm going to go out there and look with the best capability that I can. And that's going to prove tough because I'm a single person running around out there doing a documentary, going to be going to these locations. It's hit or miss. And I imagine for you guys, so you, as the position the two of you are in, is you receive reports and then you investigate them. It's at some level, it's probably frustrating. You're going to get there after the fact. Wouldn't it be great to be there as it's happening, right?
Yes, it would.
That would be great.
Unfortunately, they don't tell us when they're going to be available.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it happens.
They give you a phone call like, "Hey, we're going to hang out for about a bay today."
I will say though, just to circle back quickly to the lady's question about a neighborhood watch, and I can't speak for Dan or his chapter, but I know in Connecticut, I would say all of our members are watching the sky. I think that at every meeting we talk about sightings in Connecticut. We talk about what's new this month, the status of cases. They are aware of what's in our skies and what we're reporting in the database as sightings. And so they all have this natural curiosity and they are looking at the sky. So in a way, I think Connecticut does have a homegrown neighborhood watch that's statewide. We're not all on the same block, but we're all throughout the state looking up at the sky. And really, it's like a giant telescope of eyes. So I'm pretty proud of my chapter for that. I would say that they do watch the skies, and we document it as best as we can. So
yeah, likewise, I would echo what Mike just said. The Maryland chapter, the members do exactly that.
That's a good thing. In Florida where I live, unfortunately, this state is packed full of insanity. Like everything happens here. I don't know, like you name the phenomena, it happens here. So, and some of the people from Florida, from MUFON I'd spoken to, they're understandable with that. And some of the researchers I do off podcast interviews, they're nonstop busy. The paranormals, the UFO. So I connected a couple of the ufologists and a couple of the paranormal guys, on the off podcast. And now they're connected, and they're starting this group where they're going to be more or less having shifts of who watches what sector of the sky. I thought it was pretty smart. It sounds like a lot, but it sounded pretty smart. And eventually, you got to hope that it'll be that way everywhere, because it really, again, like you guys are saying, it comes down to equipment. Really good equipment to spot it. And it's hard. Like we were saying, you're not funded governmentally, right?
Right.
there's got to be some way where, like, I'm going to talk to Douglas about this, but there are camcorders that are pretty impressive at pretty, reasonable prices. I went nuts on mine. Mine's meant for filmmaking, period, right? And I'm excited to use it. And then, hopefully when I do, it's not a scenario where I see something abnormal and I run to it. And the last thing you guys hear from me is that, well, he got it documented and we'll always remember him, right? Because that's the guy I am. I run right at it. The two of you, I imagine in the future, you guys probably open more lines of communication between your two states, right?
I would hope so. I think so.
Yeah.
We should do that. That should be organic. We should definitely do that.
Yeah, because again, soon I'm going to have a lot of MUFON. I'm going to have a big meet and greet for MUFON. I'll include you guys with that as well. And the idea is for everyone to know one another and have, like, where if Mike has something bizarre, he could call Dan and they could communicate on that. And if there's something similar there, this way the cases are more open to you guys and it helps out with investigating in the future, right?
That'd be great. That's a great resource. And thanks for doing that. Take time in setting that up.
Yeah, I'm going to make a platform for it. Why not? You know what I mean? Like, again, it's the podcast. I do this because I want to do it. I'm interested, right? I'm not hoping to become some nationally known figure. I really not. I just want answers. It's just, and I was telling you guys, this is my childhood curiosity and my imagination on the comeback, and mostly due in part because, those videos of the pilots, what they found, that reopened the door for me immensely. And speaking to guys like you helps, right? Because you're on the ground, and it's good for me to have a reality check sometimes. Because I get, in my mind, if I had it my way, everyone would have top-end equipment on their rooftops 24/7 looking for something to report back. In my world, right?
Yeah, that would be nice.
It would be, trust me.
Or we'd all have all sky cameras. Those a couple grand, I think those things are, but they're incredible. I don't know if you've ever seen one.
No, you got to email that to me. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will, definitely. I'll send it to you, both of you, after the meeting.
I'm pretty pushy. You know that, right? Like, I will try to find something. So,
yeah, I'll send it to you guys, and then you can talk about it on a podcast.
So, Dan, in your background, obviously, what got you involved with is the curiosity thereof, and you wanted to investigate on your own.
Right.
Do you find that your background kind of prevents people from being more open with you?
No, not at all.
Right.
Not so far. Of course, I don't advertise what my career was, but everyone in my chapter, they know.
I find that as a plus, right? That background gives you a plus.
It does.
Which is why I wanted to get you and Mike connected, because you're both very, have a very like mind, right? I think your communication moving forward is going to be great. And I say this because I recently interviewed someone off podcast. He had a very interesting sighting in Delaware. Mm-hmm. And about 10 minutes in, he asked me if I worked for the CIA. It's like, well, no, I don't. But just, for the fun of it, what makes you think this? He goes, you're asking very specific questions. And I'm like, well, I don't mean, like, I'm just trying to get the most information I can get. He's like, your voice is coming in really well, aren't you? I'm on my mic. And I was saying, well, no, I'm using my microphone for the podcast. I'm not recording you. That's just what I use because it helps me to hear better and speak clearly, right?
Right.
And so he starts talking, and partway through, he just stops. Goes, you're deaf. I heard a beep. You're with the government. He hung up on me. I was like, what?
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
That was bizarre, right? The CIA trying to interview, but for you guys, I imagine you're not running into a lot of that.
No,
I have not had a Men in Black knock on my door yet.
Right.
Not at all.
Yeah, or you're not being accused of being part of the government, right? Like,
no, not yet.
It was funny to
the day is still young, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the approach you have is kind of, again, the beep he heard, I'm not even kidding. This was an off podcast. He heard the microwave. So if you're listening, I'm not with the CIA, right? But in any event, gentlemen, moving forward, if there are cases that I come across in your areas, I'm going to contact you with it, right?
Sounds
Great.
good.
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a question for both of you because it's in your region. are you seeing a lot of, and I'm going to read this to you, aurora type lights in the sky? It's followed by a sound. I have never heard of that before, so that's new.
What do they mean
not.
by aurora? Are they talking about the aircraft aurora?
That's what well, no, I think they mean the aurora borealis lighting.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I think they mean.
My answer would be no. We have not.
I didn't even think of that craft till you said something. So maybe she was talking about that. I don't know.
She might be talking about that aurora aircraft. I don't know.
I guess that makes sense because that would be something that'd make a loud sound to follow.
Yeah, the aurora borealis, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. So, yeah, something about atmospheric sounds too. She highlighted that information. I've never heard them.
Be the aircraft. No, we haven't.
No.
I haven't, at least in Connecticut. I don't know about Dan in Maryland.
No, we have not.
Huh. Well, that's different for me.
At least it hasn't been reported.
Right, yeah.
That's true.
In reading what I'm reading here, I think she is leaning towards what Dan was talking about, that Aurora ship, because she definitely said, oh yeah, okay, so I think she means like a large sonic boom. I don't know. I don't think I've even heard a sonic boom before in my life.
Well, if she means lights, that ship is supposed to go very fast. You might not even see it.
Right.
If it's at a cruising, like a descent speed or something, but...
Yeah, she was saying the northeast. I thought of you guys right away. So that's something I want to look more into. I know nothing about that. All right, so
it's news to me.
Moving forward for you guys, I'll say the experiences. When I say experiences, I mean the abduction cases, but I say the experiences. How many of those cases are you guys coming across lately?
I haven't had any in Connecticut. Not recently.
I'm seeing a pattern with that, right? It goes... There's an abduction case, followed by a lot of activity in the sky, followed by a dry period that's reemerged with another, if I'm reading this right, I'm going to assume fourth kind is what she means. Another of the fourth. I think she means fourth kind, but doesn't that mean that means abduction, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Huh. I'm telling you now, people find patterns. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, if you think about it, I tell people in Connecticut when we talk about abductions, I was like, if we're lab rats to these aliens and they're using us for experiments, you have to first you set the experiment, then you let it run, and then you monitor it. But you can do that from a distance. And then you get the experiment and collect the data and either dispose of the experiment or create a new one. So maybe they're at the stage now where they're monitoring the experiment. They're up in their little spacecraft seeing whatever they did during that abduction flap, the effects. And then they're going to come back in a couple months or a couple years and redo the new experiment on us.
That's a good point. Because that's how we would do it, right? That's
how we do it now in the labs. Yeah.
That's a good point. So yeah, maybe that's the pattern that's emerging. Maybe if in that sense, they came here, they did what they had to do. Now they're monitoring from afar, which creeps me out more. But so you guys are discussing earlier about having more in-house meetings. Are you guys getting to that point?
We've been doing them in Connecticut since May.
Okay. And Dan, you guys started up yet?
Not yet. We are still doing virtual meetings via Zoom. We're hoping to flip that over into in-person meetings in the springtime, assuming COVID calms down.
Yeah, assuming so. I've really given COVID much thought in the last couple of weeks. All right. Well, here's what I'm going to propose. I'm going to talk to Debbie too. Having like a monthly meeting, even if it's on this platform, we could do it on this one if it makes it easier for you guys. About talking about case study from all over the United States, because there's definitely some you guys need to listen to from your point of view. I've met some interesting people in a month, very interesting, and like you said earlier about Stephen Greer, I had a hard time wrapping my head around that guy until I met some people that then not just UFO related. We're talking about psychologists and the power of meditation. And so now I had to open more doorways, right? I can't, and I'm big on it. And you guys, you'll know that from me. If you don't already, you'll know it from me now. I'm open to learn anything, you know? And something said to me about, you know, the ability to, I noticed to a personal fact, if you focus enough and you know, you meditate strong, you could build focus. You meditate strong, you could build a crazy amount of enthusiasm to do great things. There's a couple of people I've spoken to about remote viewing. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't know how to take that at first. And then I found out how common not common, you know, it's not in a science book, but it's more spoken of and more common than what I thought it to be. So I have actually a neuroscientist I'm going to speak to about the capabilities of that. And off podcast before he comes on, he did say there's powers of the brain that it's beyond our understanding, much beyond our understanding. So I'm interested in hearing what he has to say about that.
Yeah. Remote viewing is a fascinating field. Some of the abilities that advanced remote viewers can do and where they can go, they can cross into the other side. They can go back in time. It's absolutely amazing. Some of the things that a well-trained remote viewer can do. Yeah. Boggles your mind.
I read too. I didn't notice, but the CIA used them. I didn't know that either.
That program started in Maryland, by the way, at Fort Meade.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Huh. I was shocked to hear that. I didn't know that was a real thing, but turns out, yeah.
You know, if you want to read a good book on that, it's called Phenomena by a woman named Annie Jacobson.
Phenomena.
It's a fantastic book if you haven't read it.
Annie Jacobson, you said?
Yeah. You might want to read that before you do your podcast on remote viewing. It goes through everything that happened at Fort Meade, all the government involvement with remote viewing, the earlier start where it was out in Long Island and then out in California before it got picked up by the government. Excellent book.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Dan, do you think the government's still using that?
Have no idea.
I'm going to start. I'm going to start harassing them now. I want to know. Some of the stuff I read. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dan.
Well, just an example of that remote viewing. Apparently, I don't know if it's Ingo Swann did a session, and he claims that he saw via remote viewing entire structures on the back side of the moon.
Yeah, that's the one I read about.
That was Ingo Swann. Pretty incredible if what he said is true.
That blows my mind. You know, because think about and I talked with the guy from SETI, Seth Shostak. Mm-hmm. Dark side of the moon, prime real estate for viewing the universe. If we were to put a scope or something on that part of the moon for us, right? It's prime. Right. And then it got me thinking about that incident. And we don't know very much about that side of the moon, or do we? I have to read more about it, other than we've passed over it, but it's legitimately super dark. It has no contrast. So there's a lot of possibility there. I don't know. For me, moving forward to look into that, I'd have to think about who I'm going to call on that one.
Well, I would say definitely someone knows, because we've sent enough probes, right. And even the Apollos went around the dark side of the moon. So there is something in government on that.
Yeah, there's got to be mapping of it, because I know they have the map.
At least reports.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that. I would like to know more, because the point of me talking to Seth about it was like, well, why don't we just build a big telescope there? We could see everything much better, and then it came to money, and so. It always comes to money. That's why, it's unfortunate to say this, but if we find shiny stuff on the moon, it'll happen, because then we have reason to be there. Corporations are going to go there and mine for mining purposes. And that's usually how it starts. Where can we make money? And then we'll figure out all the fun stuff.
You could try and file a FOIA request, not asking for stuff on the dark side of the moon, but, it's all in your wording. But FOIAs can be successful. Look at everything that the Black Vault has picked up over the years. So it's a place to start. It might take you years to get an answer. Have to get bounced around between agencies, but
there's no shortage of time for what I do, right? So I've already got a good lineup coming in, and then on top of which, when I do end up doing a documentary, and you guys will hear from me, especially in that time, because I'm going to be calling on you for just let me know where to go, point me in a direction, and I'll go out.
Sure.
Well,
Sounds good.
Before we close, gentlemen, is there anything else you guys want to add in?
Last time we chatted, Adam, you had a very keen interest in the Greys. Have you been doing any more research on that?
I have, and I find so much. The Grey, for me, because of their physique, the way they have no real expressions. I personally think their eyes are scanners, right? Because if you look at it, if you do the measurement of what the alleged measurement of the eyes, it's perfect. Because that's a big head, which is essentially a great computer to upload whatever consciousness or AI. And the eyes, the way people describe that these things look at them, you get the impression that they're scanning you, because the way they're staring down. And I've heard this in countless reports, the way they look at them. And when they speak to them, it almost seems telepathic. Well, this goes back to they have an advanced Bluetooth. And if you have an advanced Bluetooth, and bear in mind, your brain is made up of electrodes and nerve endings and fluids, they could you could transmit radio waves into someone's head right now, right? And if you have an advanced machine to do such, who's to say what the limit is? So far with the Greys, I was really steadfast on them being non-biological entities. But alongside of that, I hear tremendous reports that there's a taller one that is more expressive and seems more biological. So I had to sit back and think about that. And so, in conclusion, I think, and it's like our robots now. Like whenever we make a robot now, we try to make it closest to us as possible. I'm not sure why we do that, but maybe because it's identifiable or it's more natural. But I have to think that there's the larger entity has created these smaller Greys, as said before, as their grunt work, the drones of the hive, right? Mm-hmm. And I still kind of believe they're robot. I have to believe they're an advanced robot, extremely advanced. If you think about how they're walking around, tiny legs, tiny arms, large head, you need a large head for the computer. And if it's robotic, it's using, strong materials. The arms don't have to be very defined, nor the legs do either. And another thing I find fascinating is that the only time that there's reported the Greys are dressed, it's when they're the taller ones. And the other ones are just pure gray, and they show no genitalia. They have no mouth, like sliver for a mouth, really no ears. This all brings me back to, there's a movie Will Smith did, iRobot. I think it's iRobot. And if you look at that robot, we tailored it to look kind of like us, but it really has, slit for mouth, really no ears, because everything's a sensor inside the machine's head. And that's my imagination runs right to that. It's more practical to have more of these things running around. And who's to say that the consciousness upload to their mind isn't the alien playing an avatar role? As our technology increases, you have to make room for that, because we're not far behind what I'm describing, right? 30 years ago, that was insane to talk about. Like if you went 30 years ago and told someone, hey, I'm going to put this in my ear and I'm going to talk to you without touching anything, they would think you were insane. And then fast forward, now we have little earbuds that graduated from Bluetooth. And then if you talk about what Elon's doing, forget it. The sky's the limit. You're going to have a chip in your head. And this conversation you and I are having, or the three of us, there wouldn't be words. There wouldn't be a podcast. It would just be a knowing, an image in your mind. You would just know. So when I think about the Greys, in theory, my own theory anyway, and again, I don't speak from science. I speak from curiosity and imagination of a child who watched technology leapfrog our own biology. And that's where I combine all this from. It makes the most sense to me. Even Whitley Strieber, the way he describes these entities, very, no real emotions. You can't distinct them from one another. And even he said there's a taller one that is more biological. So some of that computes. I mean, how do you feel about them, Dan?
I think I agree with you about them being possibly robotic, but I also think that it's very possible that they are organic too, some type of a hybrid.
Right.
But I'm not sure. There's a good book, and I'll recommend one for you and your listeners. Is Richard Dolan wrote a book called Alien Agenda, and he talks about that very topic a lot. You have a chance, pick that up and read it.
Richard
He
Dolan?
offers some good thoughts on what they are and what they do.
Hope you're listening, Richard, because I'm going to be reaching out to you.
He, of all the research I've done, the reading, he probably, to me, is one of the most level-headed and clear thinking. Very apolitical. He's objective. He's a good researcher and a good author.
He sounds like me. No politics involved.
Yep.
Thinks imaginatively, mixed in whatever science I take in. When I say advanced robot, by the way, Dan, I'm more or less like, all right, picture Terminator, where the exterior has a biological,
Right.
That's how I depict them. Except, we have to think our biology is carbon-based, and wherever they come from, it may not be that. It could be a silica-based. Hence why their gray appearance is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the ideas I've floated around. Then I get into these, where people are discussing the reptilians, and I have to wonder is if they have this advanced technology, when they're going to do something invasive, can they alter our perception of what we're seeing? That's something our military is talking about trying to do, right? Altering the perception of your surroundings. And when that goes to in other words, I was watching a show where we're building a suit where you can legitimately blend into the background, right?
Right.
Almost like a chameleon. And so I wonder if these different things that people are reporting are just what they're making us perceive as opposed to what they really are. Mike,
possible.
Mike, do you have a position on the Greys or what you think they are? I know we've spoken to before, but anything that, and I've spoken, just Mike's thoughts, not the general, what you've learned anyway.
I think that they are test tube aliens. I think that they're biologically created in a lab, the little Greys, and I think that they're programmed to do a specific task. I think they're built to be spacefaring creatures. As a genetically engineered being, they don't probably need to eat, which is why they have a little mouth. They have big eyes for the darkness of space, or if they have different lenses for different planets and light waves that they might encounter, that they can maybe adjust their eyes for that planet's to see in that planet's environment. Their heads are big because they need a computer. I mean, space is complicated. Look at how we train our astronauts. I mean, you practically need several degrees in advanced aeronautics before they even launch on to the space station. And so you can imagine how complicated space flight is with a faster than light machine. So that would explain the big heads. They just need computing power, same way like the NSA has giant computers in their basement. So I think they're designed for a specific task, which is spacefaring. And if you look at the way we are using drones now, we're trying to develop drones that be smart enough with like Will Smith's AI, as you mentioned, in our image to make it more palatable to us, but to basically do our task, to send them into areas where we think it's either too dangerous to send a human or it's too mundane to send a human, so we will send a drone or a robot. So if you're an advanced civilization and you want to go to planet Earth to collect a few humans to abduct, you send a few droids, or as Star Wars would say. You send these robots or biologically created entities. And that would explain why with the abductions, abductees say they have no emotions, they have no empathy, they have no feelings. They're just robotic, they do their task. And when a task is disrupted, like in the case of Travis Walton, when he got off the table and he was like, swinging that little metal, some kind of object at him, they didn't know what to do. When you listen to the way he describes it, they were almost like this is off task, like a computer is when an algorithm is written wrong and it encounters a bug. So I think there's so many parallels between that, and that's what I think they are. I think the little grays are nothing more than the worker bees of an advanced civilization that are created to do a specific task, accomplish it, and then return the product back to the home planet.
That makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, a feature, something, especially if it's created, right? No empathy, no emotions, just a task at hand. That makes sense. You know, it's tough because I'm open to all and any suggestions, right? I even like yours a lot too. And you know, back to the Will Smith, the iRobot, that troubles me. Like, you watch that movie some time ago, and then you hear the warnings of Elon about AI, and that troubles me, because if, God forbid, those things decided they got just smart enough where we became, you know, well, we don't need them. That would be a problem. You know, because they don't need sleep, rest, they don't feel. So I could see the parallel with AI and then, yeah, even biologically created creatures.
The thing that worries me about AI is that I know when you read about AI inventions, they're like, we'll put these safeguards in so that they won't attack humans. You know, these I don't know what they call them. I'm not a computer expert, but they put in these so-called safeguards. But the problem is if you give a computer a task and it has the ability to think without considering empathy or human emotions, and you tell it to accomplish a task, it might not be that they feel, well, we don't need you, so we're going to get rid of you. It might be that the most efficient way to accomplish their task is to remove the human element. And all of a sudden they turn on you. Like, that's what worries me. And
Yeah.
I think that's what worries a lot of people, is that it's not that they purposely try to exterminate us, but that of them moving through their task, the most efficient way to complete that task might be not having the humans around to do that, to interfere with them.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine tell me once, a long time ago, we had this conversation. He goes, yeah, well, if Terminator was real, we'd be in real trouble. Like, well, if AI didn't want us around, in my opinion then, it was like, if AI didn't want us around, they would attack us with biology. They'd probably release disease, right? It would be the most practical way to get rid of us. There wouldn't be a war, per se. They would shut down our computers, take away our entertainment, take away the electricity, and who knows what something molecular they could deal with, or nanotechnology. It wouldn't be the war that they saw in the movies, I'll tell you that, because it's not practical. I think AI would be a little bit more, you know, what do we do that's going to minimize how much material we use? So that scares me more, because you can't see that. So it's tough calling it, you know. As far as us traveling and getting interplanetary, and I had this discussion with a couple of scientists. I feel like we're going to end up finding something biological just in our own solar system. And I feel like it's going to be one of the moons of either Jupiter or Saturn. It's not going to be an impressive life form, right? Probably like, I don't know, who knows, like bacteria, but life all the same. I think that happens in the next 2 decades. Because with our probe advancement, what we're planning on doing, I just don't see why we would stop at just certain places. I think we're going to send probes out all through our own solar system to find stuff. And I base that because of what we discovered on Venus, right? Or not discovered. We're assuming that gas we found around Venus is biological in nature. I don't know the exact reasoning why, but we're assuming that. So who knows what the future holds. But in any regards, gentlemen, before we close out, I'm gonna get some information to you guys. I'll do it off air, and then people the next time they'll hear. Is there anything else you guys want to put in?
No, thanks for having us on. I appreciate it.
Exactly. Thank you, Adam, very much.
Not a problem, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
See you, Mike.